get started. We're at 2 minutes after. That should work. So hi, everybody. I'm Michael Munson, and I'm happy to have everybody be here tonight. And I'm really excited to have Annie Lakatos. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Lakatos, but it's all good.
Lakatos. You know, I asked around, and so you're going to probably have to say it again. I'm going to probably stick with your first name.
That sounds good.
I will get it. So anyway, thank you for being here, and thanks all for being here who are listening. This is one of a series of programs with a really fun, exciting set of programs that are funded by the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin Endowment, which I still have to read on my notepad. So we're really excited about the programming that we've been able to do and the Ask sessions, which is what we're doing tonight. So we've got a wonderful series of Ask the Experts. So ask the physician, ask the nurse practitioner, ask the advocate. And so this is one of those sessions. I just wanted to set us up a little bit tonight, make sure that everybody knows how to access the fun Zoom mode. So how you're going to communicate with us tonight is through either raising your hand, and if you've been here before, you know how to do this, and Mark, you know how to do this, right? So if people can raise your hand, that would be cool. It's usually on the bottom of the screen. Okay, now people are not going to play with me. Thank you very much for raising your hand. Way cool. Excellent. We're going to do one at a time. This is perfect. And then if folks can find the chat box, which is usually, again, at the bottom of the screen. And why don't we have folks type in, what is the favorite way that you like to move your body? So what's the favorite way that you like to move your body? Walking, yoga, walking around, perfect. Rock climbing, biking, yep, perfect. Great answers. No wrong answers with that one, right? About how we want to move our body. So perfect. And that kind of falls into our theme tonight, which is to talk about things like smoking and eating and moving and all of those good things and how we can stay healthy, whether we do those things or do those things a lot or do those things a little. And I just want to turn things over to you, Annie, about maybe you can give us a little bit of an introduction and say your last name again so that we all have it in our heads. And then I think you're going to do about half an hour, 45 minutes of sharing, and then we can have some engagement after that. Is that work for you?
That sounds great.
Perfect.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm Annie Lakatos, as Michael said, and I'm a nurse practitioner at the Inclusion Health Clinic at Frederick and the Medical College. I've actually been a nurse practitioner for about 10 years, over 10 years now, working primarily in our internal medicine clinic on campus, and I did leave for a couple of years to work down in Kenosha to help staff their STD and women's health clinic there, only to return to the medical college. And so I joined the Inclusion Health team in October of 2018, and it is really my joy practice. So I was sharing with Michael before that it's a focal point for me on many different levels. So I'm thrilled to share this information with you. My hope is that this will be a start of a conversation tonight or in the future with your clinicians. And my goal is really just to normalize the conversation. So I've created just a PowerPoint for us to go off of, and I'm hoping that that'll just provide a framework for us to discuss. And then any questions I'm happy to field going forward. So for tonight, we're going to talk specifically about smoking and smoking cessation, how that we can eat healthy and wise during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as how do we stay healthy and active. So I like to start kind of big picture. Why do we care about this stuff? What's the big deal with all of this smoking stuff? So I'm sure that someone in the audience has experienced the comment by a clinician that you should stop smoking, it's bad for you, and you need to stop drinking soda because it's bad for you, or you have to exercise because it's good for you. And I always ask, what does that exactly mean? What does that mean for me? And I mean, is it a big deal to have a soda here and there? Is it that big of a deal to have a cigarette here and there? And so we're gonna talk a little bit about that tonight. So one thing that I find super interesting is habits and the patterns that emerge in our life. And I've listened to a number of podcasts and read a number of books about this. And essentially what happens is that we create patterns in our life, and those patterns persist if we keep doing the same thing, researchers believe, for at least 28 days. And so if we can create a pattern, good or bad, that will persist through our life. So, so patterns are really discussed or kind of framed in the context of friction. So how do we increase friction to stop a behavior from happening versus how do we decrease friction to increase a friction from happening, or a behavior from happening? And we're going to talk about that in the concept of smoking, as well as food choices, as well as exercise. I want to just clarify too that a lot of times changes take time and a lot of persistence. And so I think that we can all think about a period of time in our life that we started doing something, good or bad, for our health, that just took a little bit of energy as well as commitment, and that's not going to change. And definitely in this talk, I hope that emerges. I also like to give people the why, or the reasons behind some of the recommendations that we give. So I came late to my nursing career. I did different things in my 20s. And so I'm always like, why do we do it like that? Or how is that conveyed to our patients that makes sense for us? So I think it's important just to start with saying that there's a lot of information out there about smoking. So it's bad for us. What does that mean? That simply means that we know it increases the risk of a number of cancers, and it also increases your risk of heart attack and stroke. As a 23-year-old or a 32-year-old, that might seem really far off and not pertinent to us now. Trust me, those years go very quickly, and soon enough we'll find ourselves in our 50s and 60s in a different state of health. So it's really good to talk about this now. It's also important to consider the foods that we consume, and how I really see food as medicine. So how do we consume and take care of our body, our temple, and how do we do that for the long term that makes sense? And actually, next week we're going to talk about that in even greater detail, but I'm going to give a little overview tonight. And then when we talk about weight, and I mean, I've heard other clinicians say to patients, you have to lose weight. You have to lose weight. That's not a silver bullet. That's not gonna, make or break people, but it can help in terms of joint pain and the development of arthritis. And interestingly enough, there has been an association for people who are carrying extra weight to have greater risk and poor outcomes when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's an interesting thing to consider as well. So we're going to talk about smoking. And what I like to start out with, it's not on the screen, but I want everyone to understand that 50 to 60 years ago, the medical community recommended smoking to people to reduce anxiety. So I just want everyone to know that the medical community was very much a part of recommending smoking. Obviously, things have changed in a big way. But I like to ask people, when did you start smoking? But what's so good about it? Like, what do you love about it? Does it give you just that time to settle, and it gives you, a moment in your busy day to think about what's going on? But what do you least like about smoking? Is it the money that you're spending, or what else? So those are the points that I like to highlight in terms of friction. So, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide, but that's those pivotal points, and think about that. Where are you at in terms of your smoking health, or your history, I should say, and what does that mean to you? The other question that I think is really important to ask is, do you even want to quit smoking? And full disclosure, when people say no, I'm like, great, sounds good. Let me know when you're ready, because I think me giving people a pile of information about how bad smoking is, it goes through one ear and out the other, because we're human beings and that's normal. I want people to feel ready, or they have a goal of quitting smoking. I will be your cheerleader. clinicians then will really, pile on the tools to help that make that happen. It's also good to know that if people have attempted to quit in the past, research tells us that the possibility of quitting in the future becomes even greater. So you may have quit for about 3 days. Awesome. That doesn't mean that that was a missed thing or that that was a mistake or anything. That actually will contribute to future attempts at quitting and the success, the ultimate success. So I want people to really think about that as well. No attempts are a missed opportunity. So friction, let's talk about that. What I like to game plan with people, and this really has to be a conversation because I can't live in your, home and tell you, oh, you shouldn't be smoking that cigarette or whatever the case is. But what I want people to consider is how do you interrupt the pattern of thinking that you want a cigarette or, your body saying it's time for a cigarette and grabbing that cigarette. So some of the recommendations that I give to people is I want them to dole out a certain amount of cigarettes in the morning and say that's all you get all day long. So if you tend to smoke, first thing in the morning with a cup of coffee, then you know that you only have, for example, 9 cigarettes left if you've doled out the 10. But it at least gives you some power in terms of how you decide to use those cigarettes. And that in itself can empower you to cut back on the number of cigarettes that you use. So that's something to consider. A big step would be to just not have them in your home. So that can cause some problems, especially during our safer at home orders. And, do you want to go out to the store and get masked up and go out to the store and get cigarettes? But it gives you enough barriers in that process to really think about it and say, yeah, actually I do. And when you do, you get it. But it at least allows you to interrupt that ease of getting, wanting a cigarette and getting a cigarette. So another recommendation that I give to people, but I also talk them through this, is changing your routine. So I had mentioned that cigarette with your cup of coffee in the morning. I like to call those trigger cigarettes. And trigger cigarettes really come out of having a habit of having a cigarette with a cup of coffee or after you go to the bathroom in the morning or with a beer or whatever the case is. And how do you interrupt that? So you change your routine. Instead of getting up and making a cup of coffee or a pot of coffee to start your day, what do you think about going outside for 15 minutes and walking around the block? Just again, to change that typical routine, which can throw your pattern off. And that's the goal here as well. I can't stress enough to people to enlist friends, family members, anyone in your life that will make you accountable for this. I know for me, when I need to do something, I'll start telling people and I'll be like, I have to do this. So I'm telling you this because I need to be responsible for myself. And the fact that you know this event about me now, I expect that you'll ask me about it, or at least keep me on the path to be successful. So I want people to think about, letting their friends know that they have a quit date or that they're hoping to quit smoking, by September or by their next birthday or whatever. What I didn't place on here is making sure that you're creating reasonable goals. So sometimes I'll see folks in clinic and they'll be like, I'm ready to quit tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, that's way too soon. Let's think about this. Let's do it next Friday or whenever, because I don't want it to be a rash decision. I want it to be a well thought decision so that success rate goes up. If someone quits tomorrow, I think that's amazing. But I want to make sure that they feel equipped and ready to rumble with that. So, all right. So moving on a little bit to eating healthy and wise. So I love talking about eating with people for a variety of reasons, but I also really look to normalize this conversation because eating can be a complicated relationship for a lot of us. Comfort eating occurs, restrictive diets can occur, just disordered eating can emerge in our life for a variety of reasons. And so I want this really to be an opportunity for a conversation. And then where do we need to hone in on our resources or our information or our education? I want everyone to know that diets are just really hard to sustain. Diets are not great because, theoretically, all of us could eat 500 calories in a day and lose weight, and it's amazing. But that's not sustainable, nor is that healthy for your body. So the goal is really to make it a reasonable process that is ingrained in your patterns and your daily life. I also don't like the word diet. I think that there's a negative connotation to that. So I'd like to tell people, how do we choose foods differently? I think that, and I actually put that in there, but there's always a time and place for Cheetos. I think that's important to remember, that restriction to all the foods that we love and all the foods that we, treat ourselves with, that's a good thing. That's a normal process, and we're humans. I want people to have cake and ice cream on their birthday if that makes most sense for them. I want them to enjoy Skittles if that's something that they love. So it's really all about moderating that intake. It's also good to know that skinny doesn't necessarily mean healthy. So there's a lot of images in our media that portray skinny people as being healthier people, as being the ideal, and that's absolutely not true. We need to be healthy and happy in our bodies, and our bodies are good, and they're important to us, and we need to take good care of them. Not all of us will be skinny or athletic, and that's good. We don't want that to be, we don't want that necessarily to be the case. We want to just take our bodies for where they're at and do the best that we can. And interestingly enough, I've read a number of articles about this, that increasing the it's not the quality, but the nutrition of your foods can actually help with depressive symptoms. And for any of us who are struggling with the stay-at-home orders and not having our usual avenues to our support systems, be them friends or family or therapists, in the normal way that we're used to functioning, it's important to remember what you're putting into your temple, into your body. And so eating more fruits and vegetables can certainly be of benefit with that. So what kind of foods should we be choosing? At the end of the day, our foods should be as natural as possible. I know I had just mentioned Cheetos, and no, they don't naturally occur, although I would love them to be in my garden. But really the goal is to focus on unprocessed food. So anything that in their natural form. Fresh and frozen are definitely the most ideal to consider. And I would say that in general, we do pretty well on fruit. It's those vegetables that are a little harder to incorporate into our eating patterns. I'll tell you that I would recommend slathering everything with cheese, but don't listen to me. That's just my own, that's my own thing. In addition, I would recommend eating your fruit and not drinking your fruit. So juice is something that really truly doesn't have any nutritional value and just, jacks up your blood sugar essentially. And so instead of having that juice, have that orange, because you get the benefit of the fiber, which is really important for your gut health. So, consider how you're getting your fruits and veggies in a day. I would also recommend substituting foods where you can. So one of the things, when I go to work, I prepare my breakfast and lunch, and literally I'm like, this is all I've got for the day. And so I like to prepare things that I know are pretty healthy for myself. Also, I do bring, a little dessert or something just in the middle of the day. It helps get those, that energy going. But consider using carrots instead of chips, for example. So, we should all increase the population of carrots in our house. But hummus is a really good protein source. It really does help fill people up if you like it. Consider using cucumbers or carrots instead of chips to get that in. Low-fat yogurt is also a good option in lieu of sour cream. Again, if that doesn't appeal to you, you know, sour cream in moderation is not a bad thing either. So it gets down to moderation and portion sizes of the foods that we are choosing to eat. I also want people to consider the size of the bags of things that we get. Like, so let's say that you're a chip person. You know, chips come in these huge bags, and what we oftentimes will find ourselves doing is opening that bag and just kind of going to town. Consider putting some in a bowl, so, and then put that bag away so that you have a discrete portion that you're working with. So that can also help guide people in terms of the quantity of calories, but also, you know, giving yourself the treat of the chips, but not overindulging and overdoing it. So in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a lot of conversations that I've been involved with about how do we take care of things coming into our homes? Do we need to be concerned about the virus being on surfaces? And truly our fresh fruits, foods of, you know, safe to eat. So I know some of the farmers markets are starting to open. I want to stress that fresh foods are really important for you and your body and your well-being. So absolutely, please eat these. If you do want to clean your food, feel free to do that with just plain old soap and water. You can see in my slide, please don't use bleach. Don't use bleach, and don't use bleach. So that's really caustic to the food, and that can also get you sick as well. So I would just recommend using, you know, just straight up mild soap and water. Okay. And then we're going to go to the third topic of staying active. So just to begin, there is a recommendation for 150 minutes of dedicated exercise per week for all people. So that can be cookie cuttered into, you know, 5 days a week for 30 minutes, or if you want to go out for 45 minutes or 15-minute slots, whatever the case is. The important thing is to stay active every day. So there is also a recommendation of just being physically engaged during your day. I don't know about everyone else, but with doing more virtual visits through work, I'm doing a lot more sitting than I'm used to. And so I'm finding that I have to get up every 30 minutes, stretch my legs for a couple of minutes, and then sit back down. And so I want everyone to consider how they're moving their bodies during the day. I've listed a few of the benefits of physical activity and engagement. And you can see that there's some huge benefits to it. So we're talking things like quality of sleep, mental acuity, and staying, you know, on task for whatever your day holds for you. It helps cholesterol. It definitely helps your heart. It also improves your stamina, your physical stamina, as well as your emotional stamina and your emotional well-being. It improves your circulation. So sometimes people can have swelling in their legs. Make sure you're getting up and moving around. And of course, this is my weakness. Sometimes I tell people that I jog in the morning so I can eat the quantity of cheese I think is appropriate for myself, which is large. That's not necessarily true, but it's, you know, it's all about moderation and whatnot. So what are our options for exercise? Again, we're looking at creating a routine or a pattern in our life. And one thing that I have found to be helpful, and both personally, but also in other people's experience, is creating a schedule for yourself to exercise. So I almost want you to schedule an appointment with yourself to exercise. Just for an example, because of my schedule, I get up at 5:30 in the morning to do something. And so that's the time that I have the energy as well as the opportunity to exercise. I know 20 years ago when I started looking at what kind of exercise I do, I actually had friends help me get up and get to the gym in the morning. So that's something also to consider about getting your friends and family involved in helping you stay on track. And then there's some fun competition opportunities out there. You know, a lot of people have Fitbits or Apple Watches or whatnot to track steps. You can compare those with your friends. You can also just see, you know, I'll call you at 5 o'clock tonight and let's go for a walk together, you in your neighborhood, me in my neighborhood, and we'll talk on the phone while we're walking around the neighborhood. So that's another opportunity for folks. It's important to go outside. So the sunshine in Wisconsin, when we have it, we want to take advantage of it. Vitamin D, we get vitamin D from sunshine. So 15 minutes of unfettered sunshine is what I would recommend for people. When you are outside, I would just strongly encourage everyone to give about 6 feet of distance between you and others. So if other people are walking or biking, again, adjust yourselves on the sidewalk just to give you your space as well. I know that some of the gyms are reopening, and there's been some question about the safety of being indoors, exercising and breathing and whatnot. That's a good question. I would say that a number of gyms are designating, what they're doing to make sure that the surfaces are clean, frequently, that it's safe to go. I've had patients say to me that this is really a pivotal thing for them not to be able to go to the gym. And so you have to balance your mental well-being and your need for that physical activity with, keeping as safe as possible during the pandemic. So I would say make sure that you're checking in with your gym to see what they're doing to help keep everyone safe. And then there are some questions about masking. I would say that if you can't keep a 6-foot distance between people, to strongly consider a mask. But when you're outside there, that would be considered a lower risk activity. I'm not sure if people have seen some of the lists that have been circulating about high risk activities and lower risk activities, but exercising outside is considered a lower risk activity. And plus it gets really hard to breathe normally in a mask. I know that when I'm walking up a flight of stairs in a mask, I become completely short of breath in that because you're rebreathing your own air. So that can be a little bit difficult. Some additional thoughts for everyone when we're looking at risk factors. So we're taking all of that information and kind of considering, how does that apply to me? When folks are on hormone replacement therapy, we know that there are possible risks for higher blood pressure, the development of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, as well as weight gain. So it's important to consider how you are also taking care of your health in the ways that you can. So through the foods that you choose, through your activity level, and what are some of the ways that you can reduce those risks? And certainly smoking cessation is one of those. I had mentioned earlier that having reasonable expectations is really important. So it gets back to skinny is not healthy. Being like uber athletic and running marathons is not necessarily for everyone. And maybe smoking 2 cigarettes a day instead of 10 is your goal, and that's great. That's absolutely fabulous. So keep those expectations reasonable. Again, losing and gaining weight is not going to make life perfect. So the consumption of our social media and some of the news, and we see, people in these situations for a moment where they look glamorous and beautiful and so well put together, they too have to get up in the morning and have, creases on their faces and have to decide how they move their bodies every day, how they're choosing their foods, and what are they doing to keep themselves healthy. And then I think that this phrase really is important. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if anyone grew up hearing an apple a day keeps the doctor away, that's true. That's so true. So that really, keeps your body healthy and humming along so that you're less prone to hear any clinician say that's bad for you or that's good for you or whatnot. So I want people to consider what that means for them as well. So that's the gist of my slides. And if we can open this up for questions.
You bet. So as folks I know there's a couple of questions in there, and I also had a couple of questions ahead of time. So let's grab what's in the chat box right now. So I think one of these you kind of answered a little bit already, but first question is, I've heard people recommend against using smoothies in order to get the most nutritional value from foods and probably fruits and veggies. What do you think about that?
Great question. So I think the concern is the added sugar that sometimes smoothies contain. So if you're making smoothies at home and you're putting low-fat yogurt in and fruits and veggies, throw some spinach in there, it won't hurt. I think that's fine. I really do. I think that it's the hard thing is when it's a commercialized product or you're going to a coffee shop and getting it, chances are they're adding sugar to that, and that's where the smoothie becomes less healthy for you. But it's actually a nice way to get your, your servings of fruit and a vegetable in the morning, and it can definitely be great, especially with frozen fruits. And again, and I keep saying low-fat yogurt. I'm a big fan of low-fat yogurt or whole fat yogurt, not non-fat yogurt, because the non-fat version actually has more sugar to it. So again, you have to weigh your pros and cons of these products.
Yeah, cool. And I was realizing that it might help folks if we maybe stop sharing screen so that people can see you a little bit bigger. Yay for bigger. Perfect. So why don't we go through the ones that are in chat, and then we'll go back to the ones that were sent in ahead of time. So do you have any tips for healthier eating for people who don't or can't cook at home?
Great question. So I would say what you want to do is stay away from anything that's fried and anything that has a great deal of creamy, delicious sauce to it. And I say it like that because I recognize that that isn't always possible. And that's the thing. I want people to enjoy what they eat. We gain a lot of quality of life from the foods that we consume. There's a lot of gatherings that we used to have that, God willing, we'll have again, that is surrounded by your food is central to it. So I would say be mindful about, the fried goods. If you can get baked chicken, if you even take half the portion and save the second half, one of the easiest ways to do that is to do it at the beginning of your meal, because I know it's easy to just keep eating and you're talking and eating, and all of a sudden the whole thing is done and it's delicious, but it does pack an additional caloric punch. So.
Great, cool. So next question is for social distancing when walking or running with another person, does it matter how we position our bodies? Should we be next to each other rather than in front or behind?
That's such a great question. So I was actually thinking about this morning as I was jogging. There's documentation out there that says that if you're parallel with a person, that's a lower risk than if you were behind them, which makes sense because as we're breathing, that's going behind us, and that is then going into the person behind us. So I would say to give yourself, a couple of feet, and as you're talking, and again, you're outside, so it's a lower risk activity. If it's someone that's in your bubble, and so I talk about, your social bubble these days in terms of who you're choosing to see and who you're sharing time with. Definitely, if they're in your bubble, that's a great opportunity to get out and support each other in moving your bodies. But I would say parallel is better than behind if you can't keep that 6 foot distance.
Cool. These are great questions. Next question is whole wheat bread any better than white bread for somebody with diabetes?
Oh, yes. So diabetes is one of those things that it's a lot of energy for folks who have diabetes, and it's kudos to everyone who does, because it's definitely very prevalent in the United States. I would say I would highly recommend whole grains, and part of that goes way back to when I used to work on a GI floor. So I used to come home and be like, wow, I guess we don't really need our stomachs as much as we need our intestines. Trust me, you want to take good care of your intestines. That's where all your nutrients are absorbed. That's where all the action happens, and your immunity is very much wrapped up into your gut health as well. So whole grains really helps kind of scrub your intestines and keep them healthy. White bread, if you were to pour like water on it, it just disintegrates. That's that sugar content of that product. And so I know that they have whole grain white bread out there for those that are a little bit more adverse to the whole grains. You don't need to go gonzo on like the grains, but whatever you can do. And if that doesn't even make sense, then cut corners elsewhere. Have sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes, or have some more carrots or whatnot. So I would say, again, white bread, not the best choice, but if that's really where you're at, sounds good. What else can you do to, do you increase your exercise, or do you do something different to be healthy?
And a follow-up question to that is, I know that a lot of people talk about like the exchange of fiber for carbs. Like, so if something has higher fiber in it, you kind of subtract that away from the carbs. Is that still a model that people are using?
That's a good question. I've not heard that so much. I will say though that glycemic index is definitely something that's still like percolating around, and there's some value to that. One of the things that I do when I get home, especially if I get home late and I'm really hungry, and I'll find a cookie because I'm like, that'll help right away. Not a great choice for me to do that. And so what do I do instead? Do I make sure that I have something healthy straight away? Or do I even, instead of a cookie, would peanut butter be better? Those are the questions that you kind of have to wrestle around. No, and the more color in your diet, the better as well. So fiber is always going to be a good thing. And then moderate, bread has a lot of hidden salt as well as sugar, as does pizza, I'm sorry to say, as does, canned goods. So there's a lot of hidden salt in a lot of the foods that we regularly consume. So it's important also to read those labels and to be familiar with those contents.
Cool, great. So the person that asked about diabetes and white bread is also asking this follow-up question, so they may be a little bit related. So are there any good, healthy snack foods that can be eaten with no preparation and don't spoil?
That's a great question. So I would say that, truthfully, I would say that hummus is one of those. And I'm not sure how you feel about hummus, but that like really sticks to your ribs really well. And again, you can use cucumbers, carrots, anything that can just kind of help you scoop that into your mouth for you. Others good snacky foods. I mean, fruits and
Like,
veggies are always going to be the important thing.
and
Yeah,
the
go
key
ahead.
is about like not spoiling, it sounds like too. So like it's prepared and not going to spoil. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, you know what? I would say that fruits and I would say vegetables truly are where it's at. Another thing to consider, and it does take a little bit of preparation, but if you do it one day, then you have it for the rest of the week. Sweet potatoes or parsnips are insanely delicious when they're sliced really thin, mixed with olive oil, and baked. And they're like chips. Parsnips, I don't know if anyone is familiar with them. They're exceedingly sweet and amazing. So that might be an option. I think that a lot of what we do, I'm thinking fruits again. Like, you can leave fruits out. So blueberries, berries, cherries, those sorts of things, you can leave them out of the refrigerator and keep them on your table so that they're just there and ready to be enjoyed. But I'll have to think about that a little bit more if there's other options out there.
What do you think about granola bars or nuts as a non-perishable, non-prepared food?
Yeah. So nuts, I think, are really healthy. They're packed with nutrients. The thing to remember about nuts is sometimes they're salted, so that can affect your blood pressure. The other thing is that they do also pack a caloric punch, so they are rather hefty in that regard. But if you were to portion yourself some nuts, that would be a great option actually. And it's good because you're getting the fiber, you're getting the nutrients, but you're also getting something that'll essentially stick to your ribs, which can be helpful. And especially for people who are on the go as well. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say we're probably not like Obama, who I think doled out like 8 almonds or whatever it was, and that was his thing before bed. And most of us don't do that small, but yeah, it's
I actually had a nursing professor that used to say 11 almonds a day. And I was like, 11? Okay. I
right.
don't know.
Whatever works. Yeah, it's cool. Okay, so another question is, are there any non-restrictive diet or eating plans that don't cost a lot of money that you can think of that would be helpful in eating in a balanced way?
Yes. So I am a big believer in understanding what your eating pattern is during the day. For anyone who's seen me in clinic, this is what I confess. April is the month of jelly beans, and I have no control when it comes to jelly beans. And a couple of years ago, I was like, wow, I can't fit into my pants anymore. This is interesting. So I ended up doing a food diary. So there are some free apps that you can download. And what it allows you to do is record. It's very annoying. I totally get that. But you record all the foods and snacks and fluids that you consume over a period of time, and then you can see what that looks like. So what you need to do then, and some of these programs allow you to do it for free, and then they will give you the amount of calories that you need to consume per day to either lose weight, maintain your weight, or gain weight, which is really nice. So at the end of the day, it's all about calories in, calories out, and making sure that you are keeping yourself healthy. Now, if you are eating carrots and hummus and apples, those are going to have less calories than, 9 almonds or those sorts of things. So it's good to keep that in mind. And I want to say, in terms of granola bars and those sorts of items, I think that there's a good place in our diet for them. So, or in our food choices, I should say, in them. For those of us who are not able to sit down and create a meal at the table every single day or every single meal, those can really help substitute and give us some fiber and some protein. So I think that they also have a good place in our food choices as well.
Cool. Great. Another question in the chat is, I've heard that when we're eating a meal, it's better to be focused on the task of eating rather than multitasking, like sitting at a desk or a computer. Is that true, and why?
Yeah. So I'd like to bring up the French culture right now. So the French have courses of food, right? And they eat for hours and they go through it and they talk and they talk and they eat and they eat. It's not that they eat more, it's that they enjoy it and are focused on eating and the quality of eating with people. The problem with multitasking is that if you don't portion out your foods, all of a sudden you've hoovered in your foods and you might get hungry again or keep eating. And so you're not mindful about what's going on there. That's literally the only thing. One of the more common patterns for people is evening snacking. So especially in front of the telly, we're exhausted, we've had a long day, we want to watch Tiger King or whatever is out there these days, and you sit down with a bag of chips and all of a sudden you're eating. And so that can be, that could be the equivalent of another meal. So just being mindful about what you're eating and the quantity. So if you create yourself, a plate of food and you're ready to rumble, but you need to work on stuff for work or school or whatever the case is, by all means, go ahead and do that. Just recognizing that you've portioned out the foods that you should eat for that meal in itself. So.
Cool. Great. And as we wait for other people to ask other questions, I had some that did come in ahead of time. So I've kind of jotted them down in terms of smoking and eating and movement. So if we go back to kind of looking at smoking, there's a question around, can I still be on hormones, especially estrogen, if I smoke?
Yes. So estrogen is not an optional medication in my world. I'm like, that's what we're doing. Now, if someone comes in and they smoke and they're on estrogen, my goal is really to talk to them about where they're at with their smoking. And if we can reduce the quantity of smoking, that sounds great. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that both estrogen and smoking can increase risks of blood clots. So it's having those honest conversations about it. But absolutely, I would say that there are some clinicians out there that'll put people on an aspirin to help thin that blood to reduce that risk. But in general, I would say that that should not be a reason to not be on estrogen or HRT of any sort. Yeah.
That's a cool answer, because I mean, that's not the answer of all providers. So that's nice, I think, for some folks to hear. A second question that came in around smoking was, if I do use tobacco products, is it better to smoke, either pre-bought ones or rolling your own? Or is it better to use something like a nicotine patch or gum, or using something like to chew?
Yeah, great question. I'm when it comes to chew, that's the one thing that I'm like, please don't. That can cause not only cancers in your lung, but literally you can lose your jaw. So I would strongly recommend against chewing. When it comes to the other products, You know, so that's such a great question. When you roll your own tobacco, you're not getting the additives of chemicals that are placed in cigarettes. So is it better for you? I suppose, but it's literally the product going right into your lungs. Um, Neither is great, just to keep that in mind as well. But you're then considering the amount of chemicals that are put into the cigarette, that needs to for consumer, consumption. I was also thinking about juuling and about vaping this morning.
Yeah.
Just to bring that up, I mean, the nicotine content in our products in the United States are very much higher than they are, for example, in Great Britain. So the product is really meant to be that stepping stone to cessation or quitting smoking. Um, my concern is that there, again, are likely large quantities of chemicals, including turpentine in that product. And so if it gets you closer to quitting or reducing your use, awesome. So it's a good conversational point with your clinicians to say, is this good for me? What should I do? What is the ultimate game plan as well? So
Here. So another question in the box is, can you suggest any apps or websites that offer guided exercise routines that we can do at home, especially without any cost?
So there are a number of options on YouTube. So I heard someone say that they like yoga. That's one of their favorite ways to move. And yoga is a wonderful and harder than you think exercise. So I would say that that's an opportunity. But I would definitely YouTube it and see what you can find. Literally, if you go out walking 10 to 15 minutes a day, that counts. And that's a great option. You don't need anything special. Just make sure that you're not going out there in flip-flops, because that might cause some foot pain. Come see me. I'll let you know. But anyway, I would say that making sure that you're just moving your body, and walking absolutely counts. It's a really great benefit. There are some studies that suggest walking 10 to 15 minutes a day actually increases the quality of sleep that you have, as well as your mental acuity. So in as little as that amount of time. So
That's really cool to hear. That's really cool. So another question is, what's your perspective on recreational or medicinal marijuana use? Are alternative intake methods like vaping better than smoking?
great question. When it comes to recreational use, well, so first of all, I just say, please vote. That's a very important thing to remember when it comes to such things. Um, I think in terms of the medicinal use, I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's an opportunity, and that we need to get to know and better understand. When it comes to vaping and smoking, great question. I put my hat on and I'm like, well, between the years of when you're 55 to 80, I'm going to talk to you about your lung cancer screening risks, and we're going to go down that path. It's important to know that anything that you're inhaling into your lungs could ultimately damage that. So, and it's not just, marijuana or tobacco. It's also people that have that occupational exposure out there as well. So our lungs are precious things. As a nurse and as a nurse practitioner, I have seen people struggle to breathe, and that's not something that I wish for anyone. So I'm happy to share those ugly stories with people if they need some motivation. Fear usually doesn't help or work, but it's something to consider. So, yeah.
Cool. So another question is, if someone feels pain after 2 minutes of exercise bike use, is it still worthwhile?
That's a great question. And I would say that makes it hard to get back on that bicycle if that hurts. I would consider trying something different, or better understanding what's causing the pain. So is it that the bicycle doesn't fit well? Is there something else going on there? Is it your knee? Is it your hip? Is it your foot? But also, I can't stress enough, walking, even just to, again, build up that stamina, to get yourself to a place where biking feels a little bit more comfortable. But definitely talk to your clinicians about that, because that's something that should be in our purview. We should absolutely be able to help support people make those choices as well.
And that ties into a question that we had ahead of time, which is kind of like, if I live with a disability, it's hard for me to do most kinds of exercise. What can I do? And obviously it's going to be dependent on what kind of disability somebody has. But
without a doubt. Yep. And I love that thought process though, because you do want to move your body regardless. And so it's about finding what makes most sense for you and what makes most sense for your lifestyle. So does it work? If you get onto YouTube, are there arm exercises that you can do, or leg exercises, or even I'm sure, and I cringe a little bit because I'm like, yes, this is true though. Everyone's probably heard, park as far away from the door as possible. Do that, because that actually then helps you move your body that length as well. So.
And I think this question came from somebody who used to swim regularly, which was better on their joints, but they're now afraid to go into the gym and go into a pool. So I think they're trying to find some other alternatives to swimming, and that is a harder thing, I think, to find alternatives to being in that weightless kind of space.
It is, absolutely. Again, like walking is low impact on the joint. So that's something to consider. And then also, biking, you have to have a bike. That's why I like walking, because I'm like, just go on outside if you can. But biking can also be a little bit more gentle on those joints, as long as you're not, racing and you're not in the Tour de France or anything of that sort. But that makes it hard. And I think definitely opportunities to find safe places to swim would be a great thing for all of us to consider and look for.
And we can't wear masks when we're swimming. So,
And we're
is there any COVID risk for swimming? In terms of like being in the water, does the chlorine bleach, does it kill?
I think it kills it. Yep. This is a virus that is taken care of with, good hand washing. So yep, the chlorine should take care of it. There should be very little risk in that activity.
That's great to hear. Another one in the chat box is, what's the deal with CBD oil that's sold everywhere now? Is it safe? What's it actually good for?
That's such a great question. So I don't know. The truth is I don't know. CBD oil is not regulated by the FDA. So we can't really take it to the bank per se and say, yes, this is exactly what you're getting. Studies have shown that the quantity of CBD in that oil ranges anywhere from like 7% to 15%. And that's based on something from work that I've been involved with. So it's important to know, are you getting a quality product and does it help? I'll tell you that CBD oil has, from what I've heard from patients, and really my party line has to be like, I don't know. But from what I've heard from patients, it has been very beneficial to help with pain and to help with anxiety and to help just feel better. And I would say if that's the case, I think it's a low risk opportunity. And definitely, if you have any concerns, definitely talk to your primary care provider or your clinician. But I would say that, again, that could open some doors of possibilities for people.
Cool. So we've got about 5 minutes left. There's another question, and this kind of relates to the how much are we walking. So is it risky to participate in protests? Well, walking usually happens at protests. So
yeah, that's such a great question. So Joyce Sanchez is a ID doc at the medical college, and she actually wrote about this. You want to, so I think it's important really to balance our community situation right now and being present to what's going on in our world and our country. I would recommend definitely wearing a mask if you do go out to protest. If people are at greater risk though of if they were to get COVID-19, be very, very mindful about that. So if you do have an underlying chronic pulmonary or lung concern, be careful. But I would definitely recommend masks, and then trying to stay away from people, again, that 6 foot, bubble around yourself. I would try to maintain that as much as possible. Do you need to be tested after you go to a protest? That's something I've also been asked. And I would say, make sure that you're monitoring your symptoms. So COVID-19, we have learned since March, isn't just about a cough and shortness of breath. It's also about, diarrhea, and it's about body aches, and it's about a sore throat and that loss of taste and smell. So make sure that you're monitoring yourself for those symptoms. And if you have any concern, please reach out to your primary care provider, and they will then give you their recommendations.
That's a great answer, and I will give us a little possible sneak preview. So Dr. Petrol and Joanna Woodbury and I did a recording yesterday. We are waiting for approval basically on it, so hopefully they will, our funders will approve it. But it was all on protesting and going to protests and what are our risks and how can we be more safe and all of those kinds of things. So if y'all can wait, hopefully we will hear in the next couple of days. But it was a really fun conversation, and it talked about a lot of things like where we are in positions and what we should bring with us and all of those really kind of neat things that are fun to talk about.
Cool.
Can we do another question before we wrap up? So could loss of voice for 2 weeks be a symptom of COVID-19?
Great question. So laryngitis is and I would call it that. I would say if you have laryngitis, what else is going on there? And that can be from anything from talking a lot, and that can strain your voice, vocal cords. I would also just want to know if that person has any other, cough, shortness of breath, body aches, diarrhea, that sort of thing. I think it's worth it. I tell my patients, I'm like, Dr. Google is amazing, but not great. So if you have any questions, reach out to your clinician and ask them, because then they'll give you, at least you'll be on their radar, so that then you can say, oh wait, I had this 2 weeks ago and now I have this, what should I do? So I would definitely consider reaching out to their primary care provider.
Yeah. And the next question in here it relates, which is, can you have COVID-19 without having any symptoms?
Absolutely. And I think that the studies have really shown us that that's one of the primary concerns are asymptomatic carriers. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So I'm aware of our time. We've got like 1 minute left. So I would love to try to wrap us up, share with folks a little bit about what's coming up this week, which is really interestingly related to what we just talked about, which is fantastic. So Kid, if you will humor me and let me share what's happening this week before we close. Tomorrow we have Fabulous Cooking with Denise. So Denise, a couple of weeks ago, did a kind of a cooking show for us, and it was really fun. So it was about how to make your food healthier, as well as how to prepare food if you don't know how to. So really fun tomorrow at 4. Thursday we're going to talk about what does pride mean to you. So kind of just a casual conversation. Friday we're going to have a trivia game around queer and trans pride, so that will be fun, I hope. And then another one that's really related to tonight is to talk about staying active outdoors. So Caleb is going to run that on Saturday, so we'll have probably some more good ideas about how people can be outside and staying active. So those are the kind of the announcements for this week. If you do want to go outside and you want to wear a mask and you need one, we will send you one. So let us know and we will send you 1 or 2 or 3. So I think those were the kind of the announcements that I had before we closed. So Annie, thank you very much for being here tonight and for having this fun conversation with us. And I know you're going to be back on next week, Tuesday, correct?
Yep. Thank you. This was great. I appreciate it.
It'll be really fun to have that conversation as well next week. And thank everybody for being here tonight and spending your evening on this beautiful day with us. And thanks, Derek, for being here too, as always. We always appreciate you. So have a great evening, and we'll hope to see you we'll hope to see folks tomorrow. I'm going to try to talk better tomorrow. So good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.